Agencies come to us and then realize that they can save 30% on sort of daily tasks by just having a structured sort of review process in place.
Hmm.
And it's a problem that they didn't know they had until they were sort of able to solve it, really.
Unless you have a system in place, you're not able to track it.
The idea of burnout at the minute, I think, for agencies from too much running and not enough actually playing and doing the creative part that agencies want to be doing more of. What would you consider to be the biggest leaks that are maybe quietly draining time and or money for agencies?
Realistic example is like 40 hours to work on a pitch. Like generally that 40 hours, somewhere around like $8,000 or something. But if you do like 10 pitches in a year, you're then talking about like $80,000.
Hey there, it's Nikki from FileStage, and today I'm joined by Drew Stein from PCI, and we'll be chatting about the leaks that are costing your agency time and money. Hi Drew, how are you?
Hi, Nikki. I'm doing great. And I'm very excited to be part of this conversation because on a day-to-day basis, myself and PCI, what we do is we partner with the agencies to help optimize their processes. And we often do that through like a process improvement initiatives or by using tools like Deltek Workbook, Economy, or referencing tools like FileStage, or figuring out how to strategically deploy AI. So I'm really excited to have this conversation because there is some like reoccurring themes that often come up that agencies don't even know is costing them money. So excited to have this conversation.
Me too. And that's actually a big part of it, I think, that we'll get into in a bit more detail, is that some of these leaks that we'll discuss are things that maybe are seen as part of the agency experience and not something that's actually a fixable issue. So from your experience, Drew, working with agencies, what would you consider to be the biggest leaks that are maybe quietly draining time and or money for agencies?
The way I think about it, because I'm process oriented, is I actually start at the very beginning. And so one of the biggest things that I notice with agencies is not really focused on bringing out getting their best clients, or maybe spending too much time on pitches for clients that aren't going to have that much ROI for them. So really what happens is agencies invest heavily in these pitches and they're not taking a proper account of, is this actually make a money for us? Even if the client does sign, we spend 100 hours on a pitch, but their own clients signing $50 or 50 hours worth, you're not going to make money. So having that strategic alignment prior to even going after your clients is kind of the first. And then another thing I see a lot of is over servicing and scope creep. Basically just the teams not having the ability to track the change orders that are coming in. Maybe the teams don't know that it is like an extra revision is going to be a change order because they don't know it's in scope versus out of scope. So that's kind of like a key thing there. And then kind of like the third point that I just want to touch on briefly is resource optimization.
Yeah, for sure.
So whether you are burning employees out because they're working 12-hour days and then you have the whole hiring process or get the freelancers involved, the contractors involved, that makes your margins dip, obviously. But then also having idle resources, the exact opposite problem. So maybe you have two designers, one designer's working 12-hour days, the other designer's, not getting any billable projects. So those are kind of like three key things I see affecting a lot of different agencies and causing them to leak profits.
I would agree. We speak to a lot of agencies at FileStage as well, and for sure, the idea of burnout at the minute, I think, for agencies from too much work, or maybe not even too much work, but too much running and not enough actually playing and doing the sort of the creative part that agencies want to be doing more of. So those three that you've mentioned, can you share like a rough sense of how big those leaks can get? I think for example, strategic alignment, we know that can become that can get pretty big. But have you seen any sort of like firsthand experiences of how big those can get?
Put it like for example, focusing on which clients to go off of in terms of strategically pitching. Put a very realistic example is like if you have to spend 40 hours to work on a pitch, and let's just say like typically for that pitch, whether you're charging per hour, like how the project would be per hour, maybe it's based off deliverable. Like generally that 40 hours, somewhere around like $8,000 or something like that. So like $200 per hour, 40 hours, get that amount. But if you do like 10 pitches in a year, you're then talking about like $80,000. So it's really going to be dependent on your agency on how many pitches you're doing, how much time you're spending on it. But if you are able to quantify, you'll be you'll be shocked actually of how much lost opportunity cost there is with that.
Yeah, that is a huge, when you think of that over a year, that is a huge spend, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of then going
Huge When you think of that over a year, that is a huge spend, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of then going off that is, being able to track, your lost opportunity costs of that. But then for your active projects, in terms of like over servicing and scope creep, there's been this one's a little harder to quantify because often it's agencies who don't have tools in place who are over servicing and
Suffering.
scope creep. But there are multiple different reports out there for people who've done these type of analysis, and a general consensus is like a general agency will lose 10 to 25% of project margin because of over scope creep.
Wow.
And so that's, I'm bad at math, so I'm gonna use like a 100K project. If you're talking about that and it's a 100K project ends up being 150K, maybe you're not billing for that 100 extra 15K. So that's net loss that's going directly to your agency. If you do that for multiple different projects, you can see how that adds up very, very quickly.
That's incredible. Yeah, when you really think about it, that again is what I said earlier, coming back to that idea of maybe not actually realizing, but it's hard to quantify, isn't it, as an agency, especially a busy agency. And also maybe there's part of it that feels like, oh, that's part of the process, that's part of the creative process. Maybe if we've got, for example, at File Stage, we see a lot of agencies come to us and then realize that they can save 30% on sort of daily tasks by just having a structured sort of review process in place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a problem that they didn't know they had until they were sort of able to solve it, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that actually ties directly in because unless you have a system in place, you're not able to track it. And so that actually overservicing scope creep, file reviews and so on, that also can tie into like resource optimization, right? Making sure you have the right employee staffed where they need to be and being able to see that information because like in terms of burnout and idle time, I know not every agency does, bill based on material or necessarily track time, but it's an easy way to quantify how your team's investing in it. So, for example, while it may not be realistic, let's just use like an employee who's supposed to be 100% billable, just for simple math here. And if you do like $200 per hour, so like easy math again, that's like $32,000 worth of revenue you're expecting that one employee to bring in.
Right.
If you cut their time in half, that's now $16,000 revenue. So if you tie that by an agency of 30 people, that's $480,000 per month that you're losing out on. So while you don't necessarily all going to be 100% billable, you're probably going to be hopefully around like 60% working on projects or 70% on billable projects, whatever it is. You can very easily see how that also adds up and takes away from your agency's profits.
For sure. Absolutely. And the next question I was going to ask you is when you are, well, I mean, before we get into that, maybe what are the root causes of those three big issues that you're seeing at PCI?
Well, when you're thinking about bringing in strategically your clients or prospects you want to pitch on, often what happens is there's no clear criteria for evaluating that pitch. Being able to look at, what's the effort, what's the reward going to be, and really the root cause of that on top of that is going to be siloed strategy. So you have salespeople out there, your account team out there say, hey, we'll do these projects for XYZ. And then they ask the delivery team after the client already signs. And that's a big issue. So that's one example of that.
That's for sure. That sounds familiar. I've worked with some agencies before. And it's ringing a bell.
It's a common theme. But growth is always good, but you got to keep track of it. And then also for overseeing scope creep, it's really just no consistent way that teams are defining what's in scope and out of scope, and an easy way to see that. And often what happens is teams have fear of pushing back on clients. So, maybe I'm the designer and maybe I'm just part of a thread with a client and they're asking, hey, can you do one more revision? Okay. Like, I want to make you happy. I want to make everybody happy. But realistically, I should have gotten like a change order, or project manager should have seen that and kind of stopped and said, that's a change order request type thing. And so for that specifically, I tend to relate. When my clients ask that question of how can we stop over servicing, I tend to use the example of like buying a car. If I'm buying a car and I say I'm going to buy a Toyota Camry, I like Toyota, I'll say I'm buying a Toyota Camry. I fill out the paperwork, sign the paperwork, and I go to the parking lot and I ask the salesperson, where's my Rolls Royce? The salesperson can very easily, nicely say, now we talked about a Camry, you signed for a Camry, you're getting a Camry.
Yeah,
the expectation would not be a Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
And so if we can empower teams to do the same thing of like, hey, like this is clearly in scope. this is where the expectations and this is where we're at. You can empower your team to have those communications with your clients, and it doesn't have to be as awkward as everyone necessarily feels like it is. There's no documentation or no clear communication.
For sure. And that's something we see at FileSage a lot when also feeding into this idea of there maybe not being a clear way to communicate feedback with clients. So then you end up in this cycle of, oh, but actually I meant this and I meant this. And you're 100 emails into a thread before you realize that actually, yeah, we're now at this is a new order, but we haven't done it because we've not had this process set up to like give contextual feedback right from the beginning or set expectations right from the beginning. So for sure. And then when you guys are working with agencies, do you have any specific frameworks or maybe like a step-by-step process that you use to identify and maybe plug some sort of leaks that you're seeing in processes?
Generally, at PCI, we have two different approaches that we generally take with the agencies. The first approach is kind of like the best practice recommendation. And that is ideal for agencies who don't necessarily have well-defined processes. Maybe they're smaller teams, they're just starting up. Mm-hmm. And what we typically do for that is, we provide the best practice recommendations across, their operations, project management, account management, financing, order cash cycles, and so on. And then basically through the process, we ask like, hey, this is a recommendation. Do you think that's going to work for you? And they say yes or no. And then we tailor the processes, recommendations to fit their needs. Mm-hmm. So that's a really easy way that agencies can get a faster win without necessarily going through a large full process improvement initiative, which is our second option.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so it's sort of tailored to the size as well. Because yeah, as you say, smaller agencies just don't have the time just yet, but still might be drowning a little bit in
yeah, exactly.
In the leaks, so is there one thing that agencies could do today to plug one of those three leaks that we discussed?
So focusing on the pitch work again, going back to focusing on getting the right clients, is having a clear pitch evaluation checklist, which includes like margin potential, strategic fit, and deliverable feasibility. So before you even pitch, having all that sorted out, and then like have a check-in prior to actually starting the pitch or committing to the pitch for your account manager.
Great idea.
One example.
That's a great idea. And where would that live in sort of the ecosystem of when you're communicating? So, or for an agency, where would that what part would that play in? How would they use that exactly?
Ideally, it'll all be within a single tool. So, for example, Workbook has a functionality part of the CRM where when you're starting to create a pitch, I would recommend creating like a pitch project where your teams can then collaborate on the pitch, making sure the estimated level effort is good. So, for example, often what will happen is, account manager or salesperson will say, hey, I have this pitch I need people to work on. And what happens is the delivery teams actually say, okay, it's going to require these designers, whoever else, to work on this pitch. We estimate it's going to take X amount of hours. And what can happen then is strategically, the finance accounting team, the executive team can look at that and say, okay, you know what, this is their strategic fit. We are going to work on this pitch, and hopefully we do win it. And if we do, we know how we can expect the margin to be within that specific client and project that we're working on.
And that's perfect.
So I would recommend within project.
Yeah, I guess that's perfect as well, because it's there, it's clear, it's documented. Everyone who needs to see it can see it. That sort of visibility from the beginning, I think, would be super helpful. And this is sort of a similar question, but I did want to ask you if an agency leader wanted to run a quick sort of leak audit, let's call it, tomorrow. What type of questions? Let's say, what 3 questions should they ask themselves to spot the biggest inefficiencies in their own sort of agency operations?
The first question I'd ask is there a dashboard somewhere that the team's using that shows real-time data and how their projects are progressing? If that doesn't exist, I guarantee you there's a leak somewhere within your process because you don't have the visibility into it. So that's the very first thing I would ask.
Can I ask you a follow-up on that just quickly? Because I'm sure you've seen this a lot. Is there a type of dashboard that you find works more efficiently?
Yes, and it's going to be dependent based on your agency, but really what you want to see, real quick view, is what was budgeted, and that can be based off of hours, it can be based off of dollars, just some way to quantify what has been budgeted for a specific project with your client, and then quickly being able to see those actuals and then the difference. So being able to see just real quick, log in Monday morning, hey, this project's over scope, and then you can do your deeper analysis into that. But being able to see it real time in a very simple way is probably what you'd want.
Awesome, for sure. And then, so there were three questions. So you get the first one that I've interrupted you. Are there any other questions that you would ask as part of that sort of leak audit?
The other thing I'd focus on is just having a view for resource optimization in terms of your current work on what you're currently working on, both client billable stuff and also your pitch work, and then also your forecasted work. So, if the clients do sign, what does our staffing requirements look like in the future? And what you can do is take that and actually mirror it up with like your revenue forecast. You can actually get resource optimization and properly plan your revenue. Make sure everything's strategic aligned. And if you don't have that, once again, you're probably making some profit from that.
You're leaking. There's a leak somewhere. Awesome. Yep. That's super helpful. I would add one to that from File Stage's perspective, which is like I said, we speak to so many agencies and we work with so many of them that also looking into how many revisions are going into each creative, because that's one thing we see a lot. Like we do see agencies that are having 100 email, as I said, 100 email threads for should we change a font? So I think I would add as an extra one in that agency audit to also look at how are you communicating back and forth the feedback, the creative feedback, and is there a way to freeze review rounds or make that a bit clearer? Because again, as someone who's been on the agency side as well, the amount of time you can waste going back and forth just trying to understand what the client wants is wild.
Yes, definitely is.
So before I let you go, that was super interesting, by the way, thank you very much. But before I let you go, I like to finish with a speed round. So basically, I'm going to ask you some questions and you're going to answer in 5 words or less. Luckily for you, I'm terrible at counting. So if it's more than 5 words, I probably won't realize. But just the first thing that comes to your head, okay? So, Number 1, the biggest time waster in most agencies.
Email approvals.
I agree. I hear here. Number 2, one process every agency should automate today.
Client billing.
Again, I agree wholeheartedly. 3, a telltale sign an agency is leaking profit.
No project profitability reporting.
Another good one. Okay, the next one. If you could ban one habit in agency life, what would it be?
Falsely ignoring operations for the sake of creativity. I think that's probably more than five words, but I'm trying it.
He's counting. But it's a good answer. And the last one. One word that separates profitable agencies from chaotic ones.
Clarity.
Love that. Very nice. Drew, thank you so much for that. I think that's been super helpful. I think what you've covered will help a lot of agencies who are struggling with the same things at the minute. If anyone listening would like to learn more about PCI or follow you, how could they get in touch? Where can they find you?
Simplest way would probably be through an email, drew.stein@PCI US, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect.
And there'll be a link in the comments to PCI in case you want to check out what they're doing.